Hi, this is Dave, and this is Dave's Worldview. Haven't really done anything for a little while. All the election stuff, everything that happened there, just need a little bit of time, take a break. Sometimes it's not like I really enjoy paying attention to what's going on because sometimes it can be so painful. But we can't afford to check out. So, anyhow, I just want to do a little video here and kind of cover something that I think is pretty important. Um, this is actually something from the Washington Times. It's written by Everett Piper. I'm going to read this, and then I have some other things that I want to add to it myself. And what he says is evangelicals ridiculously asked to apologize for supporting Trump. And then he says, in just the intro, it says, sins of Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and all those who voted to empower them much greater. So he says, we are now officially less than 2 weeks into the Biden administration, and our new president has a list of accomplishments as long as your arm, of which he can boast. Bragging points include, number one, the degrading of women by telling them they no longer have the right to their own dignity, their own identity, or even their own sports. Number two, the denial of science by appointing a man who doesn't even believe in the science of anatomy to be our nation's Assistant Secretary of Health. Number three, the execution of our country's youngest babies by celebrating the left's genocidal desire to kill these children just minutes before they are born. Number four, the escalation of racism by embracing critical race theory and its racist manipulation of race. Number five, the destruction of our nation by destroying its borders. For what nation can exist if it no longer has any borders to define its existence? And number six, the return to the insanity of making us dependent on our enemies for the fuel needed to heat our homes, move our cars, and run our military. And number seven, the evisceration of our economy by telling people the way for them to have more money is for the government to print it rather than to have them work for it. And number eight, the theft of our religious freedom by forcing all of us to bow to the god-awful religion of government as God. And while all of this has been happening, what has the cry been from our nation's evangelical leaders or Christian leaders? Has it been that the prophets of Baal should repent? Has it been that we should stop sacrificing our children to Moloch? Has it been that we should all join Nehemiah with a trowel in one hand and a sword in the other as we rebuild the walls of our God-given freedom? Has it been to plead with our nation's leaders to humble themselves and pray and seek God's face and turn from their wicked ways? No, this is not the message we hear from the church's higher echelons of power. In fact, it is the opposite. It seems that in the progressive spirit of reversing all narratives to suit your own political fancies, that today's church leaders think young David, rather than defying the moral monstrosity called Goliath, instead turned and threw stones at his brothers. Consider the following, and this is Christians turning on each other. Ed Stetzer, head of the Billy Graham Center in Wheatland, Illinois, says, it's time for a reckoning for American evangelical Christians. David French, the senior editor of the Dispatch, calls on evangelicals to publicly apologize to the nation. And Joanne Lyon, general superintendent and ambassador of the Wesleyan Church, posts on social media that many parishioners within her own denomination might be unwittingly members of a cult in need of being reprogrammed. And what is the mortal sin for which we must repent and be reprogrammed? Millions of Christians dare to stand against the race to hell led by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris by supporting the one man on the ticket who had proven himself willing to stand in their way. But in supporting the orange man, you implicitly endorsed his childish antics and his boorish behavior, they cry. You changed your morality. There is, however, a problem with this accusation. Put simply, it's not true. I don't know one biblically grounded Christian who ever endorsed Donald Trump's sins. I know thousands, however, who rightly considered the sins of Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and all those who voted to empower them to be much greater. Failing to see this distinction in sin's moral magnitude is the problem with the ongoing drumbeat of never Trumpism. Putting Mr. Trump's boorishness on the same moral plane as killing children, denying women's identity, and crushing human freedom simply makes no logical, legal, or biblical sense. Many of us who are faithful followers of Christ believe that if we have a choice between life and death, that we should choose life every time. Millions of the faithful understand if we can vote for religious freedom and against ideological fascism, we should. We recognize that when the choice is between one cat and another, we must stand with the guy who guards life and liberty, no matter how much of a prurient pagan he may be. To put it another way, we simply have our priorities straight. We understand the nuance of moral significance and moral weight. C.S. Lewis once said, "Put first things first, and we get second things thrown in. Put second things first, and we lose both first and second things." Human life and human freedom are first things. Intemperate tweets and tirades are not. For the past 4 years, millions of Americans had their priorities straight. In fact, we refused to change our morality and voted accordingly. I did so in 2016 and did so in 2020, and for that, I will not apologize. And man, either will I. I totally agree with exactly what Everett Piper had to say. And I agree with him that the sins of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and all those that voted to empower them is much greater than giving your support to Donald Trump. And I also will add that while today's Democrats are openly admitting that they are socialists, in my opinion, they are more like communists. Communists control media and entertainment with propaganda and censorship, not socialists. Communists have street teams that loot, riot, and burn cities, not socialists. Communists try to intimidate citizens into conformity by going after their jobs and businesses, not socialists. And communists do all they can to degrade election integrity so that they can manipulate election outcomes, not socialists. We need to stand up to what they call progressivism, but what I would call communism light, before they start acting like hardcore communists. Because if and when they do go hardcore commie, people that dare to stand up to their corrupt ideology will be sent to re-education camps or prisons, just like they do in communist countries. People that do not share their Marxist doctrine will not be eligible for the best jobs, the best food. They may not even be eligible to keep their own kidneys or other organs, because that's how things work in communist countries like China. To fast-track conformity to the political orthodoxy, the progressives are trying to steal the identity of our children by telling them that they are cosmic accidents. Accidents that evolved out of the primordial soup of nature, and that there is no absolute truth. All truth is relative. The left is trying to tell our children that their past is shameful by reminding them and saddling them with all the sins of past generations. The left is also trying to tell them that their future is bleak. Unless, of course, you give them absolute power. Then they can lead you to their version of utopia. Anyhow, you can't destroy someone's identity, shame them for their past, and deprive them of their future, and then be surprised at the meteoric rise in depression, substance abuse, and suicides among our younger generations. We need to share the truth with these young people, the truth that, like us, they were all created in the image and likeness of God, that God created them male and female to have fellowship with Him, to populate the earth, and to care for all of creation. So not only did God create them in His image, He also gave them a purpose and a destiny. We owe it to our young people to tell them the truth of who they are and why they are here. They need identity and purpose, and only God gives them that. I oppose the left in virtually everything that they stand for because their policies seem to be destructive, short-sighted attempts to build their voter base. I also have wondered if some of their social engineering projects are designed to keep conservatives busy while they work on their ultimate goal of turning our country into a global communist state. You know, if you keep giving a bully your lunch money, they will keep taking it. Now is not the time to be silent. If we do not take a stand, all the things that happen in communist countries will be happening in our United States. Many of them already have, but if we remain silent, it can and probably will get much worse. It's time for parents and grandparents to fight this ideological war like a bear defending her cubs. How do we fight this war for truth? We talk about it. We write about it. We make videos about it. We stand up for our ideas. We speak out boldly. This is not about politics. This is about issues that affect our children and grandchildren, our nephews and our nieces. And yes, they will attack you. They will slander you. and they may even try to take away your right to work and your right to own a business. What do we do then? Well, we run to the aid of those that the left tries to bully, cancel, or destroy. In the Bible's book of Nehemiah, a remnant of the Jews returned to Jerusalem following over 60 years of Babylonian captivity. The walls of Jerusalem had been broken down and burned when the Jews were taken captive, so now the returning Jews had no defense against their enemies. Nehemiah and some of the Jewish remnant went to work rebuilding the walls around Jerusalem. But they ran into fierce opposition from those that did not want to see Jerusalem and the temple of God rebuilt to its former splendor. Nehemiah chapter 4 tells the story of how Nehemiah's enemies conspired together to come and attack Jerusalem. How did Nehemiah react? Did he quit? No. Did he whine and cry? No. Nehemiah 4:9 says that in response to their enemies, it says, "We made our prayer to our God, and because of them we set a watch against them day and night." Verse 13, it says, "Therefore I positioned men behind the lower parts of the wall at the opening, and I set the people according to their families with their swords, their spears, and their bows." Now we're not talking real weapons, at least not at this point. "Those who built on the wall and those who carried burdens loaded themselves so that with one hand they worked at construction and with the other held a weapon. And lastly," he says, "the work is great and extensive, and we are separated far from one another on the wall. Wherever you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us." And so what he was talking about, they were so far separated, and that if there was an attack against them, they'd blow the trumpet, and then people would come to aid and repel the invaders. So many of us realize that, like Nehemiah and the Jewish remnant, we have a tremendous rebuilding project to accomplish. The walls of integrity, morality, and true tolerance to protect our citizens from each other and from government tyranny are broken down and need to be rebuilt. The very foundations of liberty are under attack by those that have no tolerance for dissent. We face opposition from those that don't want to see these bulwarks of a free society rebuilt. But they must be rebuilt by men and women that will stand and defend the truth despite opposition. And when the attacks come, and they will come, we need to sound the trumpet so that the other warriors can come to the aid of those of us that refuse to compromise. When leftists call for a boycott of Goya Foods because the owner said something nice about President Trump, you go down to the store and you stock up on Goya's products. If they sell them in your area, and then you donate some to your local shelter. And then when the left goes after Mike Lindell and MyPillow, go online and buy direct from mypillow.com. We did. And if a neighbor loses a job because his wife supported a certain conservative candidate or a certain conservative cause, give him some cash and tell him it's the least you can do to support the rebuilding project. And pray for those that are on the front lines in the culture war. Many of them received death threats for simply saying things that we all could have agreed on just a few short years ago. And pray for our young people. They are being confused about nearly everything by some people that are ignorant and others that have malicious intent. Their lives couldn't be more complicated, and they desperately need our prayers. Bottom line, in just a little over 2 weeks, the Biden team has made us all painfully aware that our decision to support Donald Trump for president was warranted. The left's ideology is destructive to good government and the well-being of our families. Many are growing weary, but we must rise up as one, resisting the temptation to ignore the threat that the left poses to America. We must be willing to confront their new truth with a truth that has survived for millennia. And we must go to the aid of those that come under the attacks of the left. It has been said that knowledge is power, and I couldn't agree more. That's why I want to recommend a book. It's called A Practical Guide to Culture. It's by John Stonestreet and Brett Kunkle, right there. I'd highly recommend this book. It says Helping the Next Generation Navigate Today's World. Things are very complicated, and that's a good book to help, especially if you're a parent or have some young people in your life. And then there's another book. It's called How Now Shall We Live by Chuck Colson and Nancy Pearcey. I'd also highly recommend that book. We need to get educated. We need to stand strong, and we need to stay together. And you know what? It's easy to go after a few, but if there's millions, tens of millions of us, they can't lock us all up. So I'm asking for your help to keep me out of re-education camp. So anyhow, thanks for watching Dave's Worldview. And And just God bless you, and stay strong and keep praying. This country needs it. Thanks.